Jake Miller wiped sweat from his forehead as he walked through the busy market on Nexus Station. The place was huge and filled with aliens from all over the galaxy. Some had 4 arms, others had blue skin, and a few looked like walking trees. Jake had never seen so many different kinds of beings in one place. He was a simple man from Earth who worked as an engineer on a cargo ship called the Liberty's Edge. His job was to fix things when they broke, and he was very good at it. But Jake had one big problem. He was the clumsiest person in the entire galaxy. He could fix any machine, but he could not walk 10 steps without tripping over something. Jake's captain, Lisa Carter, had given him 3 hours of free time while their ship was getting loaded with supplies. She warned him to stay out of trouble. "Just buy some food and come back," she had said. "Don't touch anything expensive." But Jake could not help himself. The alien market was full of amazing things he had never seen before. There were glowing crystals that sang beautiful songs. There were tiny robots that danced in the air. There were weapons that could cut through steel like butter. Everything was so interesting. Jake stopped at a stall run by a tall, thin alien with purple skin. The alien was selling small devices that could translate any language instantly. Jake picked one up to look at it closer. The device was smooth and warm in his hands. "Very good choice, human," the alien said in perfect English. "This translator works with over 10,000 languages." Jake was amazed. "How does it know I'm human?" "Your smell," the alien said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Humans have a very unique smell." Jake was not sure if that was good or bad, but he decided to buy the translator anyway. As he reached into his pocket for money, he heard a loud crash behind him. Jake turned around quickly to see what happened. A small, round alien had knocked over a display of glass bottles. The bottles were rolling everywhere, and other shoppers were jumping out of the way. Without thinking, Jake ran to help pick up the bottles. This was his first mistake. Jake bent down to grab a rolling bottle, but his foot caught on a piece of cloth that was hanging from another stall. He stumbled forward, waving his arms to keep his balance. People around him started to move away, sensing that trouble was coming. Jake managed to catch himself, but now he was off balance and moving too fast. He tried to stop, but his boots had no grip on the smooth metal floor of the station. He slid forward like he was on ice. In front of him was the most beautiful creature Jake had ever seen. She looked like a human woman, but her skin was covered in small, shiny green scales that caught the light like emeralds. She had long, flowing hair that was dark as space, and her eyes were bright gold like stars. She wore elegant robes that seemed to be made from liquid silver. But the most amazing thing about her was her tail. It was long and graceful, covered in the same green scales as the rest of her. The tail moved slowly behind her as she walked, like a cat's tail when the cat is happy. Jake tried to stop before he reached her, but it was too late. His right boot came down hard on the tip of her beautiful tail. The moment his boot touched her tail, something incredible happened. Every scale on the woman's body began to glow with a soft, warm light. The light spread from where Jake's foot touched her tail, moving up her body like water flowing uphill. Then the glowing stopped, and everything went very quiet. Jake looked around and saw something that made his heart stop. Every creature in the market that looked like the beautiful woman, tall, green-scaled, and elegant, had dropped to one knee. They were all looking at Jake with their golden eyes wide open. "Oh no," Jake whispered. "What did I do?" The beautiful woman turned around slowly. Her golden eyes were burning with anger, and Jake could see that she was trying very hard not to hurt him. When she spoke, her voice was like music, but angry music. "You stupid, clumsy little creature," she said. "Do you have any idea what you have just done?" Jake shook his head. He was too scared to speak. "My name is Zephyra Veltar, daughter of Emperor Vorthak of the Saurian Empire, and you, little human, have just bound yourself to me in marriage according to the ancient laws of my people." Jake's mouth fell open. "Marriage? But I just stepped on your tail." "Yes," said an old voice behind him. Jake turned to see an elderly saurian with silver scales and kind eyes. "The tail bond is one of our oldest laws. When someone touches the tail of a royal saurian in the way you just did, they become bound to that royal forever." "But it was an accident," Jake said. "The law does not care about accidents," the old saurian said sadly. "I am Kethmore, advisor to Princess Zephyra. The bond has been made. Everyone here witnessed it. You must come with us to our home world to complete the ceremony." Jake felt dizzy. Just 5 minutes ago, his biggest worry was buying a translator. Now he was engaged to an alien princess who looked like she wanted to bite his head off. "There has to be a way to fix this," Jake said. "I can fix anything." Princess Zephyra stepped closer to him. She was much taller than Jake, and he had to look up to see her face. "There is no fixing this, human. The bond cannot be broken without bringing great shame to my family and my empire. You are coming with us, whether you like it or not." Just then, Jake heard familiar voices calling his name. Captain Lisa Carter and pilot Ben Rodriguez came running through the crowd. They stopped when they saw Jake surrounded by kneeling aliens and one very angry princess. "Jake," Lisa said slowly, "what did you do this time?" "I got engaged," Jake said in a small voice. Ben started laughing. "Jake, you've been here for less than an hour. How did you get engaged?" "I stepped on her tail." Lisa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Of course you did." Before anyone could say anything else, the sound of heavy footsteps filled the air. A group of saurian warriors in shining armor came marching through the crowd. Their leader, a huge saurian with scars on his face, stopped in front of Jake. "I am Commander Thexkar of the Imperial Guard," he said in a voice like thunder. "Human, you will come with us now. The Emperor must meet the one who has bonded with his daughter." Jake looked at Lisa and Ben. "I guess I'm going to miss dinner." "We'll follow you," Lisa said. "If this is some kind of mistake, we'll get it sorted out." "This is no mistake," Princess Zephyra said. "The human belongs to me now." As the saurian guard surrounded Jake, he wondered how his simple trip to buy a translator had turned into the strangest day of his life. He also wondered if alien weddings had cake. He hoped they had cake. The saurian ship was the biggest thing Jake had ever seen. It was 3 times larger than his cargo ship and looked like a giant metal dragon floating in space. The ship was called the Stellar Claw, and everything on it was built for people much taller and stronger than humans. Jake sat in a room that the saurians called guest quarters, but it felt more like a very nice prison. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed softly with blue light. The bed was too big for him, and the chair made his feet dangle like a child's. He had been on the ship for 2 days now, and he was starting to understand just how much trouble he was in. The saurians were not like humans at all. They cared about honor more than anything else. They had rules for everything, and breaking those rules was worse than death. The door to his room opened without a sound. Princess Zephyra walked in carrying a tray of food. She had changed from her market clothes into a simple blue dress that made her scales shine like jewels. Her tail moved behind her in smooth curves. "You must eat," she said, putting the tray on the table. "We arrive at Drakmore tomorrow, and you will need your strength." Jake looked at the food. It was mostly fruits and vegetables, but they were all strange colors. There was something purple that looked like an apple, and something orange that might have been a carrot. "Thank you," Jake said. "You don't have to bring me food yourself. I'm sure you have more important things to do." Zephyra sat down across from him. Her golden eyes watched him carefully. "I am trying to understand you, human. In 2 days, you have not once tried to escape. You have not demanded to speak to your leaders. You have not even complained about the food. Why?" Jake took a bite of the purple fruit. It tasted like strawberries mixed with honey. "Where would I go? We're in space, and the food is actually pretty good." "You are very strange," Zephyra said. "Most beings would be angry about being forced into marriage." "Well," Jake said, "I am pretty angry about that. But being angry won't fix anything. I need to understand what's happening before I can figure out how to deal with it." Zephyra looked surprised. "You think you can fix this?" "I fix things for a living," Jake said. "Engines, computers, life support systems. Maybe I can fix this too. This is not a machine, human. This is the law of my people. Laws cannot be fixed like broken engines." Jake shrugged. "Maybe, but I won't know until I try." For the first time since he met her, Zephyra smiled. It was just a small smile, but it made her whole face look different. "You are either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Jake said. "My friends tell me that a lot." Zephyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tell me about your world, human. What is Earth like?" Jake's face lit up. "It's beautiful. We have blue oceans and white clouds and green forests. The sky changes color every day. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes gray, sometimes orange and red when the sun sets." "Your sun is yellow, yes?" "I have heard this." "Yes, it's yellow and warm, and we have one moon that we can see at night. It's silver and round, and sometimes you can see it during the day, too." Zephyra listened carefully. "Drakmore has 3 suns and 7 moons. The sky is always bright, and everything grows in crystals instead of dirt." "That sounds amazing," Jake said. "I'd love to see it." "You will see it tomorrow," Zephyra said. "But I must warn you, human. My father will not be as kind as I am being now. You will have to prove that you are worthy of our family." "How do I do that?" "There are 3 trials. The trial of strength, where you must show that you can fight. The trial of wisdom, where you must solve an ancient puzzle. And the trial of honor, where you must show that you will do what is right even when it costs you something." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Fighting? I'm not very good at fighting. I'm much better at running away." "That is what worries me," Zephyra said. "Saurians respect strength above all else. If you cannot show strength, they will not accept you." "What happens if I fail the trials?" Zephyra looked away. "It is better if you do not fail." The next day, Jake got his first look at Drakmore through the ship's windows. Zephyra had been right. It was nothing like Earth. The whole planet sparkled like a giant jewel. Cities made of crystal grew up from the ground like flowers. Rivers of liquid light flowed between mountains that looked like they were made of glass. "It's incredible," Jake whispered. "It is home," Zephyra said, standing beside him. "For 3 1,000 years my family has ruled from the Crystal Palace in the city of Veldrakmor. The ship landed in a port that was bigger than any city on Earth. Thousands of Saurians had gathered to see the human who had bonded with their princess. They stood in long lines, their scales glinting in the light of the three suns. Jake felt very small as he walked down the ship's ramp. Every Saurian was taller than him, and they all looked strong enough to break him in half without trying. Their golden eyes followed his every step. A group of guards escorted Jake and Zephyra to the Crystal Palace. The palace was so beautiful that Jake forgot to be scared for a few minutes. It was made entirely of blue crystal that sang soft music when the wind blew through it. Towers reached up toward the sky like frozen lightning. Inside the palace, Jake was brought before the Council of Elders. The council chamber was a huge room with a crystal throne at one end. Sitting on the throne was the biggest Saurian Jake had ever seen. Emperor Vorthak was at least 8 feet tall, with scales that were dark green and gold. His eyes were like burning suns, and when he spoke, his voice filled the entire room. So, the Emperor said, "This is the creature that has bonded with my daughter." Jake tried to stand straight and look brave, but he felt like an ant standing in front of a dragon. "You are very small, human," the Emperor continued, "and you have no tail. How can such a weak creature be worthy of a princess of the Saurian Empire?" "Your Majesty," Jake said, "I know I don't look like much, but I'm willing to prove myself." "Prove yourself?" The Emperor laughed, and it sounded like thunder. "Very well, little human. You will face the 3 trials. If you pass all 3, you may marry my daughter. If you fail—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Jake got the idea. The first trial began the next morning. Jake was given armor that was too big for him and a sword that was too heavy. His opponent was a Saurian warrior named Groktar who looked like he could punch through a wall. The trial took place in an arena filled with thousands of watching Saurians. Jake had never felt so nervous in his life. "Begin!" shouted the trial. Master Doc Groktar charged at Jake like a bull. Jake did the only thing he could think of. He ran. The crowd laughed as Jake dodged and ducked around the arena, trying to stay away from Groktar's massive fists. But Jake was not just running randomly. He was studying his opponent, looking for weaknesses the way he would study a broken machine. He noticed that Groktar was very strong but not very fast. The big warrior got tired quickly and had trouble turning when he was running. Jake started using these weaknesses against Groktar. He would let the warrior charge at him, then dodge, at the last second making Groktar crash into walls. After 20 minutes, Groktar was breathing hard and moving slowly. Finally, Jake saw his chance. When Groktar charged again, Jake grabbed a rope that was hanging from the arena ceiling. He swung out of the way, and Groktar crashed into the wall so hard that he knocked himself out. The crowd was silent. Jake had won, but not in the way anyone expected. "Clever," said Emperor Vorthak. "But cleverness is not strength. We shall see how you do in the trial of wisdom." The trial of wisdom took place in the palace library. Jake was brought before an ancient stone puzzle that had stumped Saurian scholars for hundreds of years. It was a cube made of crystal with symbols carved into every side. "This puzzle has no solution," said the chief scholar. "Many have tried to solve it. All have failed." Jake studied the puzzle carefully. The symbols looked like math equations, but they didn't make sense in any language he knew. He tried turning the cube different ways, pressing different symbols, even talking to it. Nothing worked. But then Jake had an idea. What if the puzzle wasn't meant to be solved like a Saurian would solve it? What if it needed a completely different way of thinking? Instead of trying to understand the symbols, Jake started looking at the spaces between them. He noticed that if he connected the empty spaces, they formed a pattern that looked familiar. "It's a star map," Jake said suddenly. He began pressing the symbols in the order that matched the pattern of stars in Earth's sky. To everyone's amazement, the puzzle began to glow. The crystal cube opened like a flower, revealing a beautiful light inside. The scholars gasped. In 5 minutes, the human had solved a puzzle that had defeated them for centuries. "Impossible," whispered the chief scholar. Emperor Vorthak looked impressed for the first time. "Perhaps there is more to you than meets the eye, human, but you still have one more trial to face." The trial of honor was different from the others. Jake was brought to a room where 2 doors stood side by side. Behind one door was a chest full of gold and jewels, enough to make him rich for life. Behind the other door was a group of young Saurian children who were trapped in a burning building. "You may choose only one door," said the trial master. "Choose quickly, for the fire spreads fast." Jake didn't even hesitate. He ran to the door, with the children behind it. The room was full of smoke and flames, but Jake managed to lead all 6 children to safety. Jake was finally starting to feel like he might survive this whole marriage thing. The Saurians were still strange to him, but they were beginning to treat him with respect instead of suspicion. Some of the younger Saurians even seemed curious about human ways of doing things. He was sitting in the palace garden with Zephyra, trying to teach her how to play a card game, when the alarms started blaring. The sound was horrible, like 1,000 metal birds screaming at once. Every Saurian in the garden immediately stood up and looked toward the sky. Zephyra's scales began to glow with a soft red light, which Jake had learned meant she was either angry or scared. "What's happening?" Jake asked. "Invasion," Zephyra said, her voice tight with worry. "Someone is attacking Drakmor." Guards came running through the garden, shouting orders in the Saurian language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. They were in serious trouble. Commander Thexkar appeared at their side, his armor clanking as he ran. "Princess, you must come to the command center immediately. The Emperor wants all royals in the safe zone." "What about Jake?" Zephyra asked. "The human comes too," Thexkar said. "He is bonded to you now. That makes him family." They ran through the crystal corridors of the palace toward the command center. Jake had never seen the Saurians move so fast. Their usual calm dignity was gone, replaced by urgent purpose. The command center was a huge room filled with glowing screens and flashing lights. Emperor Vorthak stood in the center, watching displays that showed ships in space above Drakmor. Jake had never seen ships like these before. The enemy vessels looked like giant metal insects. They were black and covered with spikes, and they moved in perfect formation like a swarm of bees. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. "The Vex Collective," Emperor Vorthak said grimly. "I had hoped we would never see them again." "Who are the Vex?" Jake asked. "They are a hive mind," Zephyra explained. "All their ships are controlled by one central brain. They consume entire planets, taking all the resources and technology for themselves." "How many of them are there?" Jake asked. "No one knows," the Emperor said. "They have destroyed 12 civilizations in the last 50 years. Planets with billions of people gone without a trace." Jake watched the displays as the Vex ships began to descend toward Drakmor's surface. They moved in perfect waves like water flowing downhill. The Saurian defense fleet was rising to meet them, but Jake could see they were outnumbered at least. 10-1. "We can beat them," said General Crathmore, the Emperor's top military commander. "Saurian warriors have never been defeated in honorable combat." Jake watched the first battle begin on the screens. The Saurian ships were beautiful and powerful, with crystal hulls that gleamed in the light of the three suns. They attacked the Vex formation head-on, just like Jake had seen in the arena during his trial. But the Vex didn't fight like honorable warriors. When the Saurian ships charged straight at them, the Vex scattered like leaves in the wind. Then, they came back from all sides at once, surrounding the Saurian ships and attacking with overwhelming numbers. "They're not fighting fair," Jake muttered. "War is not about fairness," Zephyra said. "It is about survival." Jake kept watching the battle, and he began to notice patterns in how the Vex moved. They didn't seem to think for themselves. Every ship moved exactly the same way at exactly the same time. When one group of Vex ships turned left, all the nearby groups turned left too. "They're like a computer program," Jake said to himself. "What did you say?" Zephyra asked. "The Vex ships. They're not really thinking for themselves. They're following a program like robots. Look," Jake pointed at the screen. "See how they all move together? And when your ships do something unexpected, it takes them a few seconds to react." General Crathmore overheard Jake's words. "The human speaks nonsense. The Vex are intelligent creatures, not machines." "But they are machines in a way," Jake said. "They're controlled by a central brain, right? That means they can only react as fast as that brain can send them orders. And if they're all following the same commands—" Jake trailed off, thinking hard. He was starting to get an idea, but it was a crazy idea. "If they're all following the same commands," Zephyra said, "then they all have the same weaknesses." "Exactly," Jake said. "Your ships are trying to fight them like individual enemies, but they're not individuals. They're more like parts of one big machine." Emperor Vorthak turned to look at Jake. "What are you suggesting, human?" I need to see your ships," Jake said. "The way you're fighting isn't working because you're thinking like warriors. But this isn't a battle between warriors. It's a battle between different kinds of technology." The Emperor looked uncertain, but another wave of alarms interrupted them. The screens showed Vex dropships landing in the crystal cities below. Ground forces were pouring out, thousands of insect-like creatures with glowing red eyes and sharp metal claws. "They're on the surface," General Crathmore reported. "All ground units, prepare for battle." "Wait," Jake said. "Can I see how your ground troops are planning to fight?" The general looked annoyed. "Human, we do not have time for your questions. We must defend our cities." "Please," Zephyra said. "Let him see. He solved the ancient puzzle by thinking differently than we do. Maybe he can help here too." Reluctantly, the general showed Jake the battle plans on a large display. The Saurian ground forces were planning to meet the Vex in open combat, fighting with honor and courage, just as their ancestors had done for thousands of years. "This won't work," Jake said immediately. "Excuse me?" the general snarled. "You're fighting them the same way you fight each other," Jake explained. "But they don't care about honor or courage. They just want to win as quickly as possible. If you line up in formation and charge at them, they'll surround you and attack from behind." "Then what do you suggest?" Emperor Vorthak asked. Jake looked at the displays again, studying the way the Vex forces were moving through the cities. "You need to fight like humans fight." "And how do humans fight?" Zephyra asked. "Dirty," Jake said with a grin. "We cheat. We hide behind things and attack when the enemy isn't looking. We use traps and tricks and anything else that works. Honor is nice, but winning is better." The general looked horrified. Fight without honor? That is not the Saurian way. Maybe it should be, just this once, Jake said. Look at your screens. Fighting with honor isn't working. As if to prove his point, the display showed another group of Saurian warriors being overwhelmed by Vex forces. The Saurians had fought bravely and honorably, but they were all dead now. Emperor Vorthak was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Show me what you mean, human." Jake pointed to a map of the Crystal City, where the heaviest fighting was taking place. Your warriors are trying to fight in the open streets, right? That's where the Vex expect them to be. But what if they fought from inside the buildings instead? The Vex can't surround them if they can't get to them. Hide in buildings? The general said. That is cowardly. It's smart, Jake said, and smart beats brave when the brave people are all dead. You could set up ambushes. When a group of Vex comes down a street, your warriors could attack from above or from the sides or from behind. Hit them fast and then disappear before they can fight back. Guerrilla warfare, Zephyra said thoughtfully. I have read about such tactics in the war histories. Exactly, Jake said. And there's something else. The Vex all follow the same central brain, right? That means if you can confuse the brain, you can confuse all of them at once. How do we confuse them? The Emperor asked. Jake was getting excited now. You make them react to things that aren't real. Like if you set off explosions in empty buildings, the Vex will send troops to check them out. But there's nothing there, so they're wasting time and soldiers for nothing. Deception, the Emperor said slowly. You are talking about deception. I'm talking about winning, Jake said. Your people are dying out there because you're fighting fair against an enemy that doesn't know what fair means. Another alarm sounded. This time the display showed Vex forces getting dangerously close to the Crystal Palace itself. We're running out of time, Commander Thexkar said. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Emperor Vorthak looked at the displays, then at Jake, then at his daughter. Zephyra, do you trust this human? With my life, she said without hesitation. Then we will try his way, the Emperor decided. General Krathmore, send new orders to all ground units. They are to use the tactics the human described. But, Your Majesty, the general began. That is an order, the Emperor said firmly. As the new orders went out, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and terror. He had just convinced an entire alien empire to change the way they fought wars. If he was wrong, a lot of people were going to die. I hope you know what you're doing, Zephyra whispered to him. So do I, Jake whispered back. On the displays, they watched as Saurian warriors began to move away from open combat and into the buildings and alleyways of the Crystal Cities. At first, nothing seemed to change. The Vex kept advancing, their red eyes glowing in the crystal light. Then the ambushes began. Groups of Vex would march down empty streets, only to be attacked suddenly from above by Saurian warriors hiding on rooftops. The Saurians would strike fast and hard, then disappear into the crystal buildings before the Vex could respond. Jake's plan had seemed simple when he explained it in the command center. Get close to the Vex command ship, find a way inside, and plant a virus in their central computer system. But now, floating in space in a damaged Saurian fighter, Jake was starting to think it might have been the stupidest idea he had ever had. The fighter's engines were barely working, and half the controls were sparking from battle damage. Jake had convinced Commander Thexkar to let him pilot a captured Vex shuttle that had been modified with Saurian stealth technology, but that plan had fallen apart when Vex interceptors shot down the shuttle before it could reach the command ship. Jake had barely escaped in an emergency pod which the Saurians had found floating in the debris field. Now he was stuck in a crippled fighter, watching the battle rage around him while Zephyr's voice crackled over the radio. "Jake, get out of there," she was saying. "The command ship is too heavily defended. Come back to the palace." "I can't," Jake said, looking at his instruments. "My engines are damaged. I'm drifting toward the planet and I don't have enough power to change course." "We'll send a rescue ship," Zephyr said, but they both knew there weren't any ships to spare. Every Saurian vessel was either fighting for its life or already destroyed. Jake watched his fighter drift through the Vex fleet, past the massive command ship he had been trying to reach. The ship was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, covered with weapons and armor that could destroy anything that came near it. But as Jake floated past, his engineer's eye caught something interesting. The command ship had thousands of small ports along its hull, probably for maintenance and repairs, and some of those ports looked big enough for a small fighter to fly through. "Zephyr," Jake said into his radio, "I'm going to try something crazy." "Jake, no. Whatever you're thinking, don't do it." "I love you too," Jake said and turned off his radio. Jake fired his remaining engine power in short bursts, using the fighter's momentum to guide it toward one of the larger maintenance ports. The port was protected by a force field, but Jake had noticed that the force fields flickered every few seconds, probably when ships passed nearby. He waited until a group of Vex fighters flew past, causing the force field to flicker, then fired his engines at full power. The fighter shot through the gap just as the force field came back online. Jake found himself flying through a narrow tunnel inside the command ship. The walls were covered with glowing conduits and strange alien machinery. He had no idea where he was going, but he figured anywhere inside the ship was better than floating in space. The tunnel opened into a huge chamber filled with what looked like computer equipment. Jake crashed his fighter into a bank of alien servers, hoping the explosion would cause some damage to the Vex systems. When the smoke cleared, Jake crawled out of the wreckage and looked around. The chamber was enormous, with rows and rows of glowing computers stretching as far as he could see. This had to be the central brain that controlled all the Vex ships, but Jake was not alone in the chamber. Moving between the computer banks were maintenance robots, small spider-like machines that seemed to be repairing damage from his crash. They hadn't noticed him yet, but Jake knew it was only a matter of time. He needed to find a way to disable the central computer, but he had no idea how Vex technology worked. Their systems looked nothing like anything he had ever seen before. Jake was trying to figure out how to approach one of the computer terminals when he heard voices coming from a side corridor. Not robot voices, real voices speaking in fear. Following the sounds, Jake found himself in what looked like a prison area. Behind energy bars were a group of young Saurians, probably civilians who had been captured during the invasion. They looked up in surprise when they saw him. "Human?" One of them whispered. "How did you get here?" "Long story," Jake said quietly. "How many of you are there?" 12, said a young female Saurian with silver scales. "I am Lisath. I was a computer technician before they captured me." "Computer technician?" Jake's eyes lit up. "Do you know anything about Vex computer systems?" "A little," Lisath said. "I studied alien technology at the university." "But why do you ask?" Jake quickly explained his plan to disable the central computer. Lisath listened carefully, her golden eyes growing wider as she understood what Jake was suggesting. "It might work," she said finally. but you would need to access the core processing unit, and that is heavily guarded. We'll figure that out, Jake said. First, let's get you out of here. Jake studied the energy bars holding the Saurians prisoner. They were powered by a control panel mounted on the wall nearby. The panel had several alien symbols on it, but Jake noticed that some of the symbols were repeated in different patterns. It's like a combination lock, Jake muttered. He started pressing symbols in different sequences, trying to find the right pattern. After several tries, the energy bars flickered and disappeared. "How did you do that?" asked another young Saurian. "I fix things for a living," Jake said with a grin. "Come on, we need to move before the robots notice you're gone." Jake led the group of young Saurians through the corridors of the command ship, looking for the central processing unit. They moved carefully, hiding whenever they heard the sound of approaching robots. "There," Lyseth whispered, pointing to a heavily armored door at the end of a long corridor. "That should be the core." The door was guarded by two large combat robots that looked much more dangerous than the maintenance machines Jake had seen earlier. These robots had weapons and sensors that could probably spot intruders from a long distance. "We need a distraction," Jake said. "Something to draw the guards away from the door." One of the young Saurians, a male named Corval, raised his hand. "I can create a distraction. I worked in demolitions before the war." "What kind of distraction?" Jake asked. Corval smiled, showing sharp white teeth. "The kind that makes loud noises and bright lights." While Corval went off to find explosive materials, Jake and Lyseth studied the door to the processing core. It was sealed with multiple locks and security systems, all controlled by alien technology that would normally be impossible for humans to understand. But Jake had learned something important during his time with the Saurians. Different species might use different technologies, but the basic principles of engineering were the same everywhere. Locks needed power, sensors needed connections, and computers needed programming. "The lock system has a backup power source," Jake observed, tracing the power cables with his finger. "If we cut the main power, it switches to backup automatically. But if we cut both power sources at exactly the same time, the lock will malfunction and default to open position," Lyseth finished. "That's very clever thinking." A loud explosion echoed through the ship as Corval's distraction went off. The guard robots immediately left their positions and headed toward the sound, just as Jake had hoped. Jake and Lyseth quickly cut the power cables to the door locks. The heavy armored door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the central processing core beyond. The core was a massive sphere of crystal and metal, suspended in the center of a large chamber. It pulsed with different colors of light, and Jake could hear a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "That's the brain of the entire Vex fleet," Lyseth said in awe. "Every ship, every robot, every weapon system is controlled from here." "Then this is where we stop them," Jake said. But as they approached the core, Jake realized he had no idea how to actually disable it. The sphere was covered with alien symbols and interfaces that meant nothing to him. Even with Lyseth's help, it would take hours to understand how the system worked, hours they didn't have. "Jake," Lyseth said urgently, "the guard robots are coming back. We need to do something now." Jake looked at the crystal sphere, thinking desperately. How do you disable a computer system when you don't understand how it works? How do you fight technology that's completely alien to you? Then Jake remembered something he had learned as an engineer. Sometimes the best way to fix a complicated problem was to create a simple solution. "We don't need to understand how it works," Jake said suddenly. "We just need to break it." "Break it?" Lyseth looked shocked. But if we destroy the core, we might not be able to control it. We don't want to control it, Jake said. We want to confuse it. Jake pulled out a small device he had been carrying. The universal translator he had bought at the market on Nexus Station, back when his biggest worry was learning alien languages. The device was designed to process and translate thousands of different languages simultaneously. Help me connect this to the core, Jake said. I don't understand, Lisa said, but she helped Jake find a way to interface the translator with the Vex computer systems. The Vex brain controls everything by sending out commands in their computer language, Jake explained as he worked. But what happens if we flood it with every other language in the galaxy at the same time? What happens if we give it information it can't process? Lisa's eyes went wide as she understood. Information overload. The system would crash trying to process conflicting data streams. Exactly, Jake said. Sometimes the best way to fight a smart enemy is to make them think too much. Jake activated the translator and set it to broadcast every language in its database directly into the Vex command network. Immediately, the victory celebration on Drakmor lasted for 3 days. The crystal cities rang with music and laughter as the Saurian people celebrated their survival. But for Jake, the best part was seeing Zephyra smile without any worry in her golden eyes. They stood together on the balcony of the Crystal Palace, watching the last of the Vex ships burn up in Drakmor's atmosphere. The 3 suns were setting, painting the crystal cities in shades of gold and red. I still can't believe it worked, Zephyra said, leaning against Jake's shoulder. You defeated an entire invasion fleet with a translation device. And help from your people, Jake reminded her. Lyseth and the others were just as important as I was. Maybe more important. You are too modest, Zephyra said. My father is very impressed with you. The whole Empire is talking about the human who saved Drakmor. Jake felt uncomfortable with all the attention. He had never wanted to be a hero. He just wanted to fix things and maybe not trip over his own feet so much. What happens now? Jake asked. I mean, with us. Do we really have to get married? Zephyra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Do you want to get married? Jake thought about it. A week ago, he had been a simple engineer who fixed broken machines. Now he was engaged to an alien princess and had somehow become a war hero. It was all very confusing. But when he looked at Zephyra, at her beautiful scales that caught the light like emeralds, at her kind golden eyes, at the way she had believed in him when no one else did, Jake realized that the confusion didn't matter. Yes, Jake said. I think I do. Zephyra's smile was brighter than all 3 suns. Then we will be married, according to both our customs. Saurian tradition and human tradition joined together. The wedding took place a month later in the great crystal cathedral of Vel Drakmor. Representatives came from all over the galaxy to witness the ceremony. Even Captain Lisa Carter and pilot Ben Rodriguez were there, wearing their best uniforms, and looking very proud of their clumsy engineer. The ceremony was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Saurian priests sang ancient songs in voices that harmonized with the crystal walls of the cathedral. Zephyra wore robes made of liquid starlight that flowed around her like water. Her scales had been polished until they shone like jewels. Jake wore traditional Saurian ceremonial armor that had been specially made to fit his human body. The armor was uncomfortable and heavy, but he figured he could survive a few hours in it. When it came time for the vows, Jake and Zephyra spoke in both languages, Saurian and English. Jake promised to honor Zephyra's traditions while sharing his own. Zephyra promised to love Jake's differences instead of trying to change them. The most important part of the ceremony was the tail bond ritual. Jake placed his hand gently on Zephyra's tail, just as he had accidentally done in the market on Nexus Station. But this time, when her scales began to glow, it was with warm, happy light instead of angry light. By the ancient laws of our people, Emperor Vorthak announced, "Jake Miller of Earth and Zephyra Veltar of Drakmor are now joined as one family." The cathedral erupted in cheers and music. Jake found himself lifted into the air by celebrating Saurian warriors who threw him up and caught him like he was a football. It was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. Later at the wedding feast, Jake sat next to Zephyra at the high table. He was trying to figure out how to eat something that looked like purple noodles when Emperor Vorthak stood up to make a speech. "My friends," the Emperor said, his voice carrying easily through the great hall. "Today we celebrate not just a marriage but a new understanding between our peoples." The crowd quieted down to listen. "The human Jake Miller has shown us something important," the Emperor continued. "He has shown us that strength comes in many forms. Physical strength is good, but the strength of the mind is just as valuable. The strength to think differently, to find new solutions to old problems, to help others even when it costs you something. These are the strengths that saved our world." Jake felt his face getting red. He was not used to being the center of attention like this. "Therefore," the Emperor said, "I am creating a new position in our empire. Jake Miller will be our first ambassador of innovation, working to share knowledge between humans and saurians. And his wife, Princess Zephyra, will be his partner in this work." The crowd cheered again. Jake looked at Zephyra, who was smiling so widely that Jake could see all her sharp white teeth. "What does an ambassador of innovation do?" Jake whispered to her. "I think," Zephyra whispered back, "you get to fix things on a much bigger scale." Over the following months, Jake and Zephyra traveled throughout the Saurian Empire and beyond. They visited worlds where humans and Saurians worked together to solve problems that neither species could handle alone. They set up schools where young humans could learn Saurian engineering and young Saurians could learn human creativity. Jake discovered that humans and Saurians made a perfect team. Saurians were strong and disciplined, with technology that could last for thousands of years. Humans were adaptable and innovative, always finding new ways to use old tools. Together, they could do things that neither species could do alone. One of their most successful projects was a space station called New Harmony, built in orbit around a neutral planet. The station was designed using Saurian engineering but laid out according to human ideas about community and cooperation. It became a meeting place for dozens of different species, all working together to share knowledge and solve galactic problems. Jake also helped design new ships for the Saurian fleet, combining traditional Saurian strength with human adaptability. The new ships could change their configuration depending on what kind of mission they were on: exploration, defense, or rescue operations. But the thing Jake was most proud of was the school they built on Drakmor. The school taught both human and Saurian children, showing them that differences between species were something to celebrate, not fear. Young humans learned to appreciate the Saurian values of honor and tradition. Young Saurians learned to value human creativity and willingness to try new things. Both species learned that the best solutions often came from combining different ways of thinking. Jake's favorite part of the school was the engineering workshop, where students from both species worked together to build amazing inventions. He loved watching a young human's wild imagination combine with a young saurian's careful attention to detail. One day, Jake was working in the workshop when Zephyra came to find him. She was carrying a small bundle wrapped in soft blue cloth. "Jake," she said, "there is something I need to show you." Jake wiped grease from his hands and looked at the bundle. "What is it?" Zephyra carefully unwrapped the cloth to reveal something that made Jake's heart stop. It was an egg, about the size of a football, with a shell that was covered in tiny scales that shifted between green and brown. "Is that?" Jake began. "Our child," Zephyra said softly. "Half human, half saurian. The first of a new kind of being." Jake stared at the egg in wonder. He had known that humans and saurians could have children together, but seeing the actual egg made it real in a way that nothing else could. "What will they be like?" Jake asked. "I don't know," Zephyra said. "But I think they will be wonderful. They will have the best of both our peoples, human creativity and saurian strength, human adaptability and saurian wisdom." Jake gently touched the egg with one finger. The shell was warm and smooth, and he could swear he felt something moving inside. "Hello, little one," Jake whispered. "I'm your dad. I can't wait to meet you." 3 months later, the egg hatched. The baby that emerged was the most beautiful thing Jake had ever seen. She had her mother's golden eyes and her father's curious nature. Her skin was smooth like a human's, but it had a faint pattern of scales that caught the light like Zephyra's did. She had no tail, but her ears were slightly pointed like a saurian's. They named her Luna, after Earth's moon and Drakmore's brightest crystal formation. Luna grew quickly, showing signs of both human and saurian traits. She was strong like her mother, but clever like her father. She could speak both languages before she was 2 years old, and by the time she was 5, she was designing her own toys using principles from both human and saurian engineering. "She's going to change the galaxy," Zephyra said one evening as they watched Luna play with a robot she had built from spare parts. "She already has," Jake said. "Look around us." Jake gestured toward the window of their home, which looked out over the city of Drakmore. The city was different now than it had been when Jake first arrived. Human-style gardens grew between the crystal spires. Saurian engineers worked alongside human inventors in workshops that combined the best of both technologies. Children who were half human and half saurian played in parks designed by both species. The city had become a symbol of what was possible when different peoples learned to work together instead of fighting each other. "Do you ever regret stepping on my tail?" Zephyra asked with a smile. Jake thought about it. His life had certainly become much more complicated since that day in the market on Nexus Station. He had gone from being a simple engineer to being an ambassador, a war hero, a husband, and a father. Sometimes he missed the simple days when his biggest worry was fixing a broken engine. But then he looked at Zephyra, with her beautiful scales and kind golden eyes. He looked at Luna, who was now